This is a place where the oddities of nature take a place in your reality, where the supernatural is second hand, and the monsters and the freaks thrive over your wildest imaginations. This is Unsettling Stories.
When I was a kid, I used to play games like The Floor is Lava with my brother Greg. I did not like it at all. Greg was far more athletic than I was, and older too. He'd do all these graceful steps and great balletic leaps that were way beyond anything my fat, pudgy body could ever do. When I'd fall and lose the game, he'd gloat for a while and then he'd go off and play something else. My neighbor, Mr. Clayton, would always watch us from the other side of the fence that separated our backyards. Mom said to stay away from him, but she couldn't stop the guy from watching us play. He seemed harmless, if not a little weird. We didn't pay too much attention to him. All afternoon, he would just watch us win races or throw the football around, only leaving his place behind the fence if he wanted to get a drink to refresh himself. Every so often, Greg would say, "Hi, Mr. Clayton," and give a big, exaggerated wave. Mr. Clayton just smiled awkwardly and looked down at the ground. To be honest, I kind of felt bad for him at the time. On an afternoon in the late of June, right after we had gotten out of school, and the day Greg's 15th birthday was going to start, he and I were just roughhousing outside. We did that pretty often. Even though he was older and taller, because of my extra heft and weight, I roughly was able to hold him down pretty well. He was still, of course, much stronger and more agile, so he always got the better of me and pinned me down. After another win by Greg, he had me helpless on the ground while he crowned over me. While I waited for him to get off, I glanced over to the side. I could see Mr. Peyton watching us with this unabated attention. His right shoulder seemed to be shifting back and forth too. And even though I was 11, I think I understood exactly what he was doing. "Come on, let's go inside," I told Greg. The tone of my voice was much different than Greg was used to, and he sensed something was going on, and he just didn't let up. I never told him what I saw. Mr. Clayton was in his yard for a few days after that. While I was reluctant to go out and play again, I kept reminding myself that the guy was harmless. Not only that, but Greg would have most certainly kicked his ass if he had tried anything. So things went on as normally as they would, with Mr. Clayton reassuming his position behind the fence later that week. After the 4th of July weekend, Greg had a couple of his friends over, Dion and his brother Rob. Dion was okay, but Rob was an absolute asshole. A bully, even. I hated when he visited because Greg felt like he had to impress him. And that's what was happening now. The four of us had climbed into the dilapidated treehouse that had been on the property before we even moved in. The thing was a wreck, too. The floorboards were missing and there were countless spiders all over the place. Still, for whatever reason, we were in there. Rob was bragging about doing something to some girl over the weekend. Greg and Dion laughed along while I just sat there, bored out of my mind. One of them suddenly got the great idea to have a pull-up contest using one of the branches above our heads. Rob took off his shirt and showed off his muscular body, prompting the other two to take theirs off as well. They did their pull-ups very easily. Rob, unsurprisingly, won. After he had made fun of them for being so weak, he turned his attention to me. "Go ahead," he sneered. "It's your turn." I told him I didn't want to do it. Then the others started taunting me until I just gave in and started doing it. Obviously, I couldn't even get one, and they all started laughing at me. "Come on, take your shirt off," Rob said. I did, with absolute reluctance. When Dion and Rob saw my absolute chubby body, they started laughing at themselves. "Now try again," Rob shouted. As I strained and pulled, I felt pain explode across my back. Rob had slapped me as hard as he could. I yelped and I cowered, but he kept slapping my back and chest while Dion and Greg looked down without even protesting. Once Rob stopped, he said, "Now watch these handprints show up." They watched, and true to his word, handprints rose out of my angry red flesh while they giggled maniacally. "Hey Steve," said Greg, "the floor is lava." I told him I didn't want to play and started to climb down from the treehouse. Rob blocked my exit. "You're playing," he informed me. I was ordered to jump to the gap between the floorboards. There was no way I'd be able to do it. I knew what I was capable of, and I just wasn't even that close to doing it. All three of the boys just whooped and hollered until I was forced to do it again. I stood my ground, though, this time. That's when my brother started hitting me. But it wasn't slaps this time. It was punches. He kept raining blows on my lower back before getting in close to my ear and hissing, "You better do it, you fucking baby." As much as I tried to keep it in, I just started crying. After a couple of minutes, Greg got bored of hitting me. I curled up in the corner as Rob changed the subject back to the girl he had been with over the weekend. And while they laughed and asked typical obscene questions, I just sobbed pathetically. Rob looked at his watch and swore he had noticed it was much later than he thought. He and his brother climbed down the creaky ladder and then left. Greg followed them and led them out, leaving me alone in the treehouse. I just sat there for an hour, seething and feeling ashamed. It would still be another 3 hours before Mom would be getting home from work. And if I had to wait up there the whole time, then that's what I was going to do. I did not want to see my brother. Mr. Clayton just stared up at the entrance of the treehouse while I sat in my legs dangling over the side. Greg came back about an hour later. Then he climbed the ladder and just pushed me forward back into the floor. I stared up at him at the splintery wood dug into my bare, hand-printed back. "You embarrassed me in front of my friends, you fat bastard," he hissed. "You ugly idiot. You fucking loser." He circled around like he was about to start hitting me again. And that's where I noticed he was. Without thinking, I kicked him in the knees as hard as I could. He gasped and stumbled backwards. And then he went dropping through the missing planks on the floor, sinking his chin on one of the wood as he went, breaking his teeth. I heard a loud thump as he hit the ground below. I took my time climbing down the ladder. And once I reached the ground, I walked over to my brother. His face was a rictus of blood as he drooled shards of teeth out of his mouth into the grass. I can't move," he wheezed. "My legs. My arms." I kicked him in the chest. "I thought the floor was lava, you prick," I whispered. "Why didn't you jump?" And I kicked him again. My neighbor watched from his side of the fence, his right shoulder moving furiously as he stared at our shirtless bodies. I smiled. "He's all yours," I informed Mr. Clayton. As I walked back into the house, I looked over my shoulder just in time to see my neighbor hauling himself over the fence.